Hello and welcome to She Leads Collective podcast. I'm Mary Gregory and I'm so glad you're here. This podcast is a space for honest conversations about what it really means to lead as a woman today and how we can all show up with more courage, care and clarity. You'll hear from inspiring women, powerful allies and bold truth tellers who are changing the game, not by playing tougher, but by leading smarter, softer and stronger. Hello and welcome to episode 2 of season 2 of the She Leads Collective podcast. So let's just think about the question that we're considering today. And that is, why is so many talented women still walking out? And despite decades of investment in leadership development, diversity initiatives and good intention, women are still leaving the workplace. I'm so pleased to have Penny De Valk here today as my guest. Penny is a deeply experienced senior leader, leadership development expert, and someone I've had the privilege of working with personally. Penny was my own managing director when I worked at Penn Talent Practice, and she is one of the most grounded and credible leadership role models I know. Penny has led at the very top as a managing director, CEO and board director, and now runs a global leadership development business working across the UK, New Zealand and the US. With such a rich career and working in similar fields, I thought this was a great way to kick off season 2. So Penny is joining me today as guest for 2 episodes. In this episode, we focus on Penny's leadership journey, what it really takes to lead at the highest levels, how gender and power show up along the way, and how those experiences shape the way she now supports leaders and organisations. And then in our next episode, exploring in more depth the elements that are resulting in women leaving the corporate workplace, resulting in a real loss of talent. And we'll also be referring to the McKinsey Women in the Workplace report that came out at the end of 2025. But for the time being, let's focus on Penny and find out more about her amazing career and what an incredible inspiration she is to many, many women as a role model. Penny, so nice to have you here today.
Mary, thank you for such a generous welcome.
Well, it's very easy to be generous when you're around, because I think you're also very generous with your time and your sharing, because I know you do a lot of support and are a great advocate for women at work and helping women rise within the workplace. So to start off with, I'm really curious about going right back, your very early career, or maybe even
Way
beyond that, in terms of what your motivation was like and how you got started.
Wow, that is big. Well, I think my motivation was fundamentally I wanted a career. I was very aware of that when I was at school even. And I think my motivation was I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make things happen. And so I didn't necessarily want a conventional life or a conventional career. So I never had really leadership, but to be honest, at school, we really didn't have leadership sort of presented to us. So that was a fairly evolving, and I sort of fell into leadership roles. My first job after my first degree was as a probation officer. And I learned, that's where you learn about authority and power as a, white middle class chick, 21 years old, having to demonstrate that. So that was really interesting. So I think that probably the motivations were less about money, but wanting to have a career, wanting to make a difference. And then something about being motivated to, my mantra very early on was say yes, panic later.
Oh, right.
So I was
Okay.
very lucky that I, very often had people who could see me at work, saw my potential, and kind of threw down gauntlets and said, you should apply for this job. And gulping and doing that, and then gulping even more when I got it. And being in
But you
that
had people supporting you for the sounds of it, in that they offered you opportunities.
always, and all men, always and they just saw you in action, and they wanted you to be on their team because they knew what you could do, and were very encouraging, and then supportive. I mean, they were often very clumsy in their support because they were giving me advice that didn't really help me as a young woman, but their intent was good.
So what I hear is that you had men who supported you, gave you opportunities. Did you experience any negative biases because you're a woman in those workplaces?
Yes, I guess some of it was just subtle. People on their own autopilots who sort of, the classic that still has to happen. I needed to be, smarter. My expertise, I had to over prepare for meetings, make sure no one sort of defaults to you being competent when you're a woman, when you're around the table. So I had to sort of do more demonstrating of that. But that was nothing overt, no one sort of pinching one another's bottoms or any of that. I mean, there was some, it was just subtle in terms of people not seeing you as a leader. I remember in my first month, I think I was a general manager of the Institute of Management, and had open door, the first woman, and had a lot of pushback from the fellows of this institute, this girl telling us how to run our institute. And again, I was on the board. I had, I'd got there. The chairman observed me. I had some, strong views about what was possible and the implications if we didn't move. And so again, he was someone who said, do you want to put your money where your mouth is? Apply for the general manager role. And it was like, big breath. And then, robust processes, never got anything on the back of anything other than my competence and my willingness to, really try and make a difference in every organization. I think that's been a theme, Mary. I'm not a status quo gal. I'm a startup or turnaround person. And that's where I get my energy from, being able to make that difference. And so one in the first month, I was I had open doors, so any of the fellows could come and meet with me. Anyone could, any of the members. So really tried to make sure there were no barriers to conversations, because I knew that a lot of them were quite taken aback with my appointment, and didn't really get it or see it as appropriate. And so must have been walking back from the bathroom. I had a meeting with one of them, and he was sitting in reception, and he said, "Oh, excuse me, dear, I'm meeting with the general manager. Do you mind getting me a cup of tea?"
That sounds so classic.
And it was so classic. It's like, this can't still be happening, but his autopilot. And but I said, of course. So your good grace always has to come first. So because went and made him a cup of tea and said, let's have ours in our office. Well, let's have it in my office. And you could just see his face.
Yeah, suddenly it dawned on him.
He never stopped apologizing. Yeah. That it was just an example of he was on his autopilot, there was a woman walking past. She was probably the secretary and probably get him a cup of tea. He was nice about it, but it was the
And you
assumption.
ended up CEO of the ILM, is that correct?
Well, I was the chief executive of the Institute of Leadership and Management in the UK.
Yes.
I did 6 years there as well. So I've sort of done, and then I've been in publicly listed. I've been in American publicly listed organizations, and I've been in, AIM listed, as we know, and publicly listed organizations here. So I've been in both the not-for-profit and the very for-profit. And that's always made me interested in leadership, because I actually think we have the same toolkit.
Well, and so I immediately want to know, what did you learn from working in those sort of organizations? Quite different, but I bet there were some similarities as well.
They were all professional service organizations, so there's an element of that. I do think that in the not-for-profit sector, the quality of our leadership is almost more important, Mary, even though that's not how people perceive it, because we have to be even better stewards of our resources and our money, whether you're a charity or whatever. So, but actually in terms of leadership, it's exactly the same. I bought the same toolkit to work. I was needing to be much more aware of the environment, and in terms of managing the tension between our mission and our commercial imperative, really important to be able to manage that paradox. And I had been trained in paradox mastery from a very early age in my career, because I knew that I needed to get skillful at managing that whole needing to take care as well as take charge.
I love that balance, take care and take charge. Now, leadership is not for sissies, is it? You know, it's like it is challenging. And I should imagine there are times, and I know from my own experience of working with you, you've had to navigate some pretty tricky terrain. So, what are the things that have kept you going through those difficult times?
It is, it's messy leadership. It's hard. It's never neat and packaged. And who knew? Of course, because it's a difficult job. And it's an important job. The things that, and so pretty much every day, you're sort of dealing with some level of complexity or conflict. The thing that I think kept me going through all of that is, again, going back to what am I here to do? My why is my North Star always. Why am I doing this? What am I here to do? Am I doing the best I can broadly, not just from a technical component, but as a human being?
So, returning to your
Yeah,
bigger picture,
yeah,
actually.
always. Yeah, my why has always been able to stabilize me when I've been in very stabilizing times. And all of the other things we know work so well for us is the people in our lives, how we look after ourselves physically and mentally, all of that ballast that we need to pay attention to all the time.
Yes, always really good, strong personal foundation.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, very good. And what do you think, having been a leader at such senior levels, there are lots of things that we fantasize or imagine is what goes on at that senior level. What is the reality like versus what we imagine it to be like?
Yeah, it's hard to know what there's a lot of mythology out there, and we do. That's part of our challenge with leadership is we romanticize it, and I understand why, because ultimately we would all secretly love someone to come over the hill on their white charger and make everything okay, and we know that's such an old, unhelpful model of leadership, but we default to that still, especially in times of crisis and chaos. So it's can be tiring, really exhausting. So it's a bit of a marathon. I think there's a myth out there that, and as you say, it's not for sissies, but there's a myth out there that it's horrible. And that's a real pity. Because you get to choose. Some of them are, some ecosystems are horrible. You just withdraw from those. And I've only ever, really had one that I've chosen to withdraw from. Um, People are good, mostly.
I think that I'd love to emphasize that because I
Yeah,
think there's so much focus on how rotten people are, but actually, on the
exactly.
whole, people are really wonderful. And the kindness of strangers, the
Yeah,
willingness and support that goes on within organizations.
really. And I think that's really helpful to always assume good intent. It's really served me well. It doesn't make me Pollyanna because I've got a really good radar for when I see that not coming. There's mythology out there that people are naturals, that people are natural leaders. And I think that's a real pity because I don't believe there's any such thing. There's no such thing. And I'd really like most women, especially young women, to get rid of that notion. I don't think people are naturals. Or if you are going to learn to be a leader, you can learn it from a book. And that too is a real myth that will have people stumbling all over the place.
How do you think you do learn to be a leader then?
Um, there are books, there are um, there is a technical expertise that you need to be aware of. You need to know your finance. You need to have good strategy frameworks. But in terms of being a leader that people want to follow, it's self-awareness, insight, all of the stuff that makes us better human beings will make us a better leader. Am I paying attention to the right things? Am I actually here with these people at the moment? Am I listening? All of that stuff. While we've got this whole body of knowledge, absolutely, that we need to be aware of. While we're practicing our up 5,000 feet, down 100 feet. Am I walking the floor? Am I able to talk to the board? So that's a muscle. And some of us are more comfortable in different areas. Getting kind of comfortable with that level of discomfort never feeling that, you're ever the smartest gal in the room, and constantly turning on that beginner's mind. I don't really know this environment. I'm not sure I know this group. And not have it as sort of like a moral failing. It's not I'm the problem. It's just like I'm
Yeah,
learning.
it definitely is a journey, isn't it?
Yeah. And if you're into learning and you can keep that open, I think that will serve you really well.
What I'm picking up from what you're saying, it's having tremendous faith in yourself, though, because you can be in those, I get a sense of you're never going to know it all. You're never going to have it all sorted because there's always going to be something else emerging to challenge you. You have to keep enormous agility to be able to, walk the floor 1 minute and then next minute be in the boardroom or whatever. But what's constant throughout that is a kind of sense of okayness with yourself. And it doesn't have to be sort of evangelical self-belief, but it's just like in amongst all of this, I am okay. I'm doing my best.
Yeah, I'm doing my best. I'm not going to, I did learn fairly early on to not take things so personally, to be a bit more Teflon. And so that helped me not kind of use up my energy on beating myself up. My energy needed to be deflecting things that I felt were not in my or the organization's interests. And that's not to say, sometimes when we look at, and I really love the way you talk about real models, because we look at role models and think, oh, they're actually kind of formidable, or I can't actually relate to them. I remember all of my career looking for women role models and going, oh no, I don't really want to be like that. She's sort of gone right over onto the alpha male, and she's sort of scary and efficient. I don't want to be her, and I don't want to work for her quietly. Or others are, really, really nice people, but they're just never quite leadership material. And so it was just having to get that grounded. I think something that did work for me well, I decided to do a mosaic of all the people, men and women, that I really did want to model, because that is how we learn, imitating. When we were kids, that's how we learn. And so that whole, if you can't see it, you can't be it. Well, create it. Create it. I love the way he uses humor to just make everyone just relax when we start a meeting. I love the way she just walks the floor, even though we know that she's got huge inbox to check in with people. I love the way he always takes us up 1,000 feet once we get into the weeds, and just sort of start looking, pay attention to what people are doing well. Because I agree, Mary, as you said, so easy for our minds to go to what's wrong and what do people do poorly. And no one is perfect. The whole conquering hero is a myth, and no one can feel like that, and no one ever will. And it's not, I know there's a lot spoken about confidence. And I just don't ever want anyone, let alone women, who have less confidence in a leadership role for a variety of reasons, to ever wait to feel confident, because it never happens. I can tell you, this stage of my career still doesn't happen. But courage is different. And what fuels my courage to go, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to have this difficult conversation. Yes, if we're going to be able to do this, we can get the team together and figure out how. And again, courage is fueled by your why. What am I doing here? We know that we can be brave facing things that are challenging and
I
difficult.
totally agree with that. I can think of situations where a value has been crossed and I immediately get into action to address that without even thinking, oh, am I
Mm-hmm.
frightened or not? I probably was, but the fact was, it
Yeah,
was so important to go and address what had
yeah.
happened
And
again.
that's your
Yeah.
moral
Yeah. And
courage.
that's
Yeah,
definitely linked to my why as well, because
yeah,
the two, that, our values and our bigger purpose and everything are all very much interlinked. So, you've mentioned before with the whole thing about navigating the gender piece. And some of those things that you had to navigate were really, really unsubtle by the sounds of it. And I think that might be a sense without insulting you about your age, but the times that we live in, I think
yeah.
it has moved on. That would be totally unacceptable in today's corporate world, I think, that sort of
Yes,
comment.
that was it. absolute,
Yes,
extreme.
yes. So, what helped you retain your integrity at senior level as a woman leader when navigating some of these very subtle biases?
Yes, because in terms of the evolution, that wouldn't happen. Someone wouldn't ask someone wandering past to get him a cup of tea. But the fundamental assumption, Mary, has not gone away. That it's still the case. I'm coaching women now who get asked to take the notes at a meeting.
Or being
Who,
told they're young. I had one
yeah,
recently.
it's being
You're
told
very
they're young.
young to be a leader.
Yeah,
She was no younger than the guy telling her, but she just looked
yeah.
younger, you know?
And with again the best of intent, she said, I don't know how to deal with this. When I go into the board meeting, the men give me a hug. But they don't do that to the guys. What am I going to do with this? And it was a good intent. They're not being, creepy. They want to be welcoming. But it's just like I'm a professional here and everything that you're trying to do. So the default to assuming that men are competent, women don't get that still. So I think that tail is there still. And I think what it took me a long time to get, and they didn't teach me at that business school, was this tension between the classic, this what the agency versus communion. What works for men in leadership doesn't necessarily work for women because we are still, and I go every year looking at all of my research around stereotypes, it's still very, very persistent, this notion that men take charge, women take care, and leadership is seen as a take charge role still, even though we've seen all of the feminization that's less agentic than it was. Still, when women exercise their agency, which we need to do as leaders, we get pushback because we're behaving counter stereotypically, and that is as strong as ever. So that served me well, understanding that, being steeped in leadership development, and then figuring out how to navigate that.
Well, I think what you're referring to, you remind me of what Mary Ann Sygart writes about in The Authority Gap.
Yeah.
That if women are direct and straight, they are penalized as opposed to with there being much more relational. And can I just suggest here, and I hope this won't upset you too much, but I'm about to say something, they're much more relational and sensitive and caring.
And need to be, Mary. Otherwise, our leadership is not acknowledged. And it's, everyone's going, oh, isn't that old news? It's not. I would love it to be. This is this paradox where women leaders need to navigate. And it's one enduring cultural scripts, this sort of divide between agency and communion. Men take charge, women take care. And leadership has been coded as masculine. So it rewards agency, but not when it comes from a woman. You'll get pushback.
So I'm curious about you because you strike me, and certainly I've been a part of your team when you've been leader. You're quite assertive. You're able to communicate clearly and directly without having to be overly relational, which is often what is expected of a woman.
Yeah.
How did you get to that point?
Yeah, it's tricky because you have to sort of have a reframe of both and it is, I just decided I would do both. It's how my leadership would land. I absolutely believe that great leadership didn't feel like I was fitting into a system that didn't accommodate me. It felt like I was creating a new system because I think all great leadership requires us to be able to take care and take charge, and men and women are equally capable of doing both. And so, yes, you have to be assertive, and you can do that with warmth. You can be directive and still be aware of the people around you. You can, because for the things that are really critical that I see, Mary, and were for me when I look back, and a couple I was intentional about, and a couple I would have been happier if I'd figured it out earlier. How women exercise their authority, build their reputation, exercise and demonstrate their expertise and influence people. Really important to a leadership career. Absolutely filled with double bind stuff in there. And these are just dilemmas our male colleagues don't, it's not their fault. And we will get pushback from men and women, by the way. these contradictions aren't conspiracies. They're kind of the vestiges of an old system, and we're in the middle of
They
it.
are, and that it's learnt behavior from that old
Yeah,
system. Yeah, and I
absolutely.
think you're quite right. It's not about pointing the finger and blaming people. We're all being indoctrinated in our upbringings to be the
Yeah,
way we are. And whether you're male or female, we've learned through experience this is how we're meant to be. And so we're in the middle of trying to shift that.
yeah.
And that's what can feel tiresome at times and difficult.
It's exhausting. And the reality is that in terms of building your competence, all the work in Marianne's book, The Authority Gaps, absolutely spot on, and very true and very contemporary. So people go, oh, well, look, all the women that, educational achievements from sporting, this sweet spot of women in leadership, the deep ambivalence still that society has about women in authority is very pervasive. So you say, how do you do it? Again, it's not contorting yourself to fit. So I absolutely believe that good leaders should take charge and take care, and we need to get skillful at the paradox. Because to me, Mary, what I see is very exciting is seeing so many organizations wanting paradox mastery as a key leadership skill, knowing that the binary either or, right, wrong, that it's really important that, because I mean that's our job these days in this climate and this chaos, is how do we solve for competing demands. And what's wonderful, and I know you'll think this is deeply optimistic, but it is that women have been doing that since the first time they stood in a manager role. We have to be both. We need to know both, and it's a good mental discipline to have. Both are true. Keep your mind open to not being as binary and as black and white as our brains are telling us to. I mean, it's not a moral failure. It's a natural human reaction to chaos.
It goes back to being a parent as well, that, you know, not everyone's parents a parent, but we've all had experience of parenting, I'm sure, be it our relatives or
Yeah,
whatever. But there's something there about taking charge and taking care absolutely comes from
yeah,
our very upbringing and from the care we've received or the care we give
yeah.
out. And that's why it's so important that we start to live that really in our leadership and take that into the workplace.
Part of it is all around these gender stereotypes that we persist with, um, and that's not that they're right or wrong, but when it comes to leadership, they really can be tricky. And it's not, and the more senior you become, the more pushback you get because you're exercising your agency. So becoming really situationally fluent, every leader should be able to do that. What does the situation require? And then have a deep repertoire of skills, of both and skills. And this won't land unless I do it with warmth and care. But the warmth and care will not overwhelm the direction of travel, but it will land. And I just think it's great leadership capability.
I agree. And I can think about leaders I've worked with, male leaders who do that.
Exactly.
And I'd far rather work for them than work for someone who doesn't. And they are much more successful leaders. It's just their journey seems to be easier than
Yeah.
that of women.
Because we
Yeah.
know the research tells us that men don't get penalized because the so-called feminization of leadership models, it's still primarily agentic in our minds, but collaborative and authentic and all of the things that we've seen go round and round, that men are rewarded for more feminine, so-called feminization, more collaborative, more take care. Women are not yet rewarded for more agentic behavior. Somehow, socially or culturally, it is a challenge. Now, we've got to remember how far we've come. Again, that's part of the both are true. We've come so far, it's still not good enough. Both are true.
That's right. And there's something about women do it naturally, so therefore it's just expected that you do it. Whereas men, it's like, oh, look, he's learned how to do it or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
And he was
Yeah.
probably able to do that anyway. And we turn that off, or we turn that expectation off. And we expect still women to do most of the childcare. It's much more career limiting for men to ask for flexible working than it is for women.
So that's a bias that's
I
affecting
mean,
them. Yeah.
yeah. And yet, I'm working with a couple where she is determined. She wants to get onto partner track. She's pregnant. She wants to go back after 3 months. He wants to be the full-time carer. Oh my goodness. In this day and age, the drama. How do we talk to our how do we talk to even our parents who were both professional women? Well, how would he know? One of the questions was, how will he know what to do when the kid's sick? Well, she said, well, Sarah said, well, how will I know what to do? I've never been. So, we think it's hard being the only woman in the boardroom, trying being the only man at the school gate.
Yes, yes. I think that's a very common experience for those men that have chosen that path, is it can feel
Yeah,
really intimidating. And also
yeah.
it's for all of us to learn and to allow that to be okay.
Yes. And how patronizing to men to say they don't know how to take care. We know, all the men in our life, we know that's not true.
So we are moving on then to consider the world today. And I'm curious about what you're seeing going on because you're in a very gifted position in that you work with people in New Zealand, the US, and the UK. So right
Mm.
across the globe you're working. So you're going to be seeing things from all sorts of different perspectives. And I'd love to know what you think feels different when you think about all, working across the globe. What feels different for you?
Wow, it's an intense time. I think everyone just to sort of step back and observe um, the challenges. Everything has become quite binary and polarized, particularly in North America. But same is happening here, and we know, this. This is not just a bad thing. This is when we are under threat, people feel under threat. Our brains just go into simplification. So it's right, wrong, good, right. So it's a normal human response to actually feeling a huge amount of threat and the joys of people being able to create threats that are actually not real. Um, so it's very binary. Having intelligent conversations is becoming increasingly challenging. Um, people's threat detectors very live. Um, and so a lot of there's sort of a victim, kind of grievance culture that is so unhelpful because we absolutely know if you feel like a victim of a system, you can't learn. Absolutely shuts down learning.
So globally, we could say there's a phenomena going on that actually is hindering people fulfilling their potential, which ultimately will
Yeah.
hinder performance from the organization's point of view.
The people who are surviving it are really working hard on where they pay attention, how much time they spend in there, and then that whole the core, so much of the core of good leadership is, as I said, what's the situation, and then being able to be really wise between the difference between reacting and responding. We don't get to react as leaders. We can't be on autopilot. No one wants to know your natural anger. We have to be able to take that wise pause. What does the situation require? How will I respond to this? And so, even as individuals, we've got to be really aware that how we respond to the world around us, we're in control of. It's just like saying it's absolutely not fair that women need to manage this double bind dilemmas our male colleagues don't need to. But yes, it's not fair, and we need to notice that it's not fair. It's essential, but being defined by it is not. So I think very important that we liberate ourselves from that. We are, our grandmothers, Mary, couldn't have imagined the influence that we would have had in boardrooms today. And so our goddaughter's daughters won't even imagine our experience. So, we need to hold our nerve. We have to hold on to our why, because we are the kind of bridge makers between how things were and how things will be. And we're in this tumultuous time of backlash, anxiety. Let's all go back to where we were because it's all too scary. And now I'm feeling personally threatened. So we just have to be as wise as we can. And I know that often real wisdom is in those tensions that that's solving for competing
Mm.
demands.
Mm.
So everyone's anxious, everyone is uncertain. We've seen a real sort of throwback to the strong man. Oh, phew, someone's going to tell us what to do. I actually think that will be a transient and a transitional reaction. Um, and all of these tensions. There's not a CEO I talk to who's not going, well, it's like, that's why they're interested in people who can master paradoxes, because it's like human, AI, national, global, local. Um, we have to be thorough, we have to be fast. There's all of these tensions. And so, really good leadership requires that you are able yourself to master those.
So real mastery of self as
Yeah.
well comes into that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And linking it to the whole diversity, inclusivity agenda, which we've seen in the States already. So, very well advertised, you know, not Facebook,
Yeah.
whoever else. I can't think of all the different tech giants that are cutting all their DEI programs on the back of the government and what's come in. What does where do you feel the situation is headed for women and for gender diversity?
Oh, that's a big question. I think it's a pendulum swing. And there's the sort of polarization that happened both in the left and the right. Everyone sort of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Um, the organizations, because I do a lot of work in North America, the organizations that are just interested in good talent pipelines and getting their best talent around the table, regardless of gender, and who have a commitment to gender equity, and just getting on with it.
That's so refreshing to hear.
And that's not all of them. And because some of them, very concerning conversations I've had, said, look, we just can't, because our clients are going, because they're all jump on the bandwagon and let's, get rid of the wokerati. And so I see, diversity fatigue, but I also see some bad solution fatigue, um, and fatigue with just having to have the cognitive load of working against our autopilots, of not being able to just be business as usual, the tensions that come with that. And sometimes it just feels such a relief to get off that and then just to default to, just being as we were.
I can concur with that. I mean, I had a client recently where it was still it was an almost closet diversity program. So we just had to really be very careful of the language that was being used because they were in
Yeah.
quite a public space. So I had to be
Mm-hmm.
really careful of the language that was being used during the program. And it was an
Yeah.
inclusive program. It was all for all genders, but
Yeah.
we just weren't allowed to call it a diversity program. It was
Yeah.
fascinating actually, really. But I completely concur. It was very challenging and exhausting to
Yeah.
design it and to deliver it
Yeah.
because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that that reaction will dissipate and it will have been, a pendulum swing, because the reality of what, if people were just, embarking on diversity programs because it was a tick box, they felt they needed to, it's not likely to stick in the organization, because the outcome, which is getting there. There's not a CEO I talk to, male or female, that isn't pulling their hair out that they can't get their high potential women. That broken leadership pipeline with women disproportionately falling out year after year, and they know it's not, about quotas, and it's not about this. They know it's about nuance and subtle. It's not overt. And most of them are doing really interesting things. Like I ran with the C-suite, and it was a program just called Meeting Civility. They decided, and we know women are interrupted more. They get told their idea, and so we just taught the CEO. He was great. He said, "Oh God, is that what's going to happen?" Interesting, Mary. He said, "Is that what's going to happen to my daughter when she's bound around the board?" And it wasn't at you guys. It wasn't reprimanding or finger wavy. It was, this is the dynamic that's happening in this evolution while we're still really getting to terms with what does a woman leader look like and behave like. Um, and so he just did some really interesting stuff. And it wasn't a big, we're going to do this. It was like, that's a really good idea, John. I think it was a build on what Judy was saying. Judy, would you like to? Very interesting. But he said, that was happening all the time and I wasn't even aware of it. And making sure it said, so Jane, what do you think about that? So there's no hiding. If women are trying to get in, watching that, interruptions. Yep. Okay, Jack, can we just finish what Jane was hearing? I'd just like to, and then he did it so effortlessly. And of course, what he was doing was role modeling to the C-suite. And it was called meeting civility. And why wouldn't you want that in an organization? And it wasn't about, oh, we've got to get, and of course, no woman wants to be in a meeting with, oh, you poor thing, you don't speak up or you don't know how to stay and play when you're being challenged.
But I hear that was coming from the top, which makes such a difference. So
Absolutely.
he was wanting his board, his meetings to be inclusive and to support everyone in there to have it, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So I'm really conscious we've moved on to the whole subject of what's going on with the state of play for gender diversity and what are the trends that are coming through. So I want to I'm going to pause us for this
Yes, let's
episode
do
and
that.
say a big thank you for what you've shared so far about your story, how you've navigated the heights of leadership and taken on the challenges in the most elegant way, I might add, Penny. You
Oh,
really role
that's
model.
very
No, you do.
generous.
You role model a real elegant approach to leadership, that whole thing of managing mastery of taking care and taking charge. I love that. That's something that I've written down and will stay with me. So that is wonderful. So I'm going to pause it for now, and I'm going to invite everyone to stay with us for the next episode, which will be released next Wednesday, which is going to be Penny and I exploring the current trends and the challenges that women are facing in the workplace and what's coming through in the McKinsey report 2025. Thank you so much for listening to the She Leads Collective podcast. If this episode resonated with you, follow the show or share it with a friend and leave a quick review below. Or leave us a comment. Change happens through conversation, so let's keep this one going. Listen out for the next episode and join me as we keep lifting the lid on the stories that matter. Take care and keep leading with heart.